Caught up in a legal land dispute for nearly half a decade, Hafide and McDelgado, welcome to the Hub, where America's stories begin. That's the reality for a local man who now joins us here on the Hub. Eddie Kirigua, Hafide.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Of course, and you've been speaking with us for months now, sharing with us all that you've been through in and out of the judicial system and whoever you spoke to in the legal community to try and secure a property that was Dad's.
Correct.
My condolences, of course, but he passed away back in 2015, was
16,
it?
2016, yes.
That's quite some time ago. And to this day, you're still caught up and entangled in court. Tell the viewers a little bit about you and what your goal is.
Sure. Well, Nick, thank you for allowing me to be here. My goal is to provide awareness, to let people know that property fraud is very, very on the rise right now. And my personal story, I want to put out there because for the past couple of years, like you said, my father passed away in 2016. It's 2025 now. What are we still doing here? What am I still arguing about? Well, there's a lot of inaction on the government agencies that are supposed to be responsible for protecting us. They happen to be the ones that actually harm me in this situation. And I just want to address and put out there the awareness of what I've been going through and try to get some action done in regards to it. It's no longer allegations.
Okay, so in 2016, Dad passed away. At what point were you involved and what happened from there?
So in 2016, my father passed away. A couple years later, you fast forward that to 2020, I'm working with Guam DOE. I come home and I get a letter of eviction. I'm wondering what's this about. Apparently, my stepmother and half-brother hired an attorney who filed an unlawful detainer action against me and then eventually evicted me out of my own home. What happened was after I got evicted, I started to review the paperwork and noticed that the conveyance that my stepmother used back in 2016, the notary public on it, she had an expired stamp and seal used on that. So I ran with that. I filed a police report. I filed a consumer complaint with the OAG. And 3 years later, I'm still trying to I'm chasing responses basically from these people. And I just recently discovered just new evidence this January. And it's brought me to this point here, speaking to you today.
Oh, what was part of the proof that they were trying to show you that you have to leave this property right now?
Well, that's just the thing. When I went into court, prior to that, I just finished my divorce and child custody, so I had the late Frank Mutauta representing me. I asked him to take a look at the case before I actually went into trial. He called me back the day before and he said, Ed, you're going to be okay. Show up to court on time, let the judge know I looked into your case and the property is still under your father's estate, not the attorney's, not your half-brother. I don't know how or why he filed this lawsuit, but go in there and tell them that the property is under the estate of your father. The judge should dismiss the case or the attorney should withdraw completely.
Okay.
So that's what I did, but it didn't work out that way. Nothing's fair in the justice system or equal. And because of financial constraints, I couldn't get an attorney. And so I had to represent myself. And in that trial, as I started to relay this information to them.
There was a trial?
Yeah, there was a trial, yes, yes. In a summary proceedings for an unlawful detainer. It's like a 30-minute hearing. It's very basic. All it is you're in a house that you're not supposed to be in and the owner wants you out. So it's very basic. There's anything extra. In this case though, I showed up and said, this person that's claiming to be the owner is not. It's still under my father's estate. They should have dismissed it, or the attorney should have withdrawn, but he didn't. They allowed him to continue, and then he provided fraudulent documents in court, and that's the documents that they used to evict me. I ended up finding out this information afterwards, and then I filed a police report, and then it's been 3 years, and nobody wants to touch this. Why? Because fraudulent evidence is in play, and the attorney that filed the unlawful detainer action is a high-profile attorney. On top of that, the Office of Attorney General, who handles these type of criminal felonies, these fraudulent conveyances, and they actually assisted my stepmother in transferring the property originally back to my father.
Okay.
So there's a bunch of complex things that actually happened, but the bottom line is that based off of fraudulent documents created by my stepmother, who used her sister who worked at Department of Land Management to facilitate these fraudulent documents, 3 court proceedings transpired after that, now based off of fraud. And just recently, in this January, I found the original creator of the documents that my grandmother created to transfer these properties into her kids, which is one of them is my father. That's attorney Jay Ariola. He was the original creator for my grandmother for these documents. I brought the documents to him in January, and he confirmed with me that the documents that are under Department of Land Management that I provided to him are not the ones that he created. So now we have a bigger problem. Department of Land Management are housing records right now that are not original copies. And we're talking about 12 different properties to 12 different people. They go by the torrent system, so everything is tracked. So time-stamped, the time you come in, the instrument number, it's all chronological order. In order for my stepmother to succeed in actually transferring this property to her, she had to alter all of the documents filed under this specific date. And I just found out in January that these documents are fraudulent. So she removed original documents through her sister who worked at Department of Land Management. They replaced them with fraudulent documents that are currently under Department of Land Management as certified copies. Nobody wants to touch this case. I emailed the OAG, a GPD, I filed a police report. I've been getting no responses back. It's been frustrating. This is about 3 years that I've been doing this.
And for 3 years since Dad passed, you were in that home. You were staying on that property.
Yes, yes.
Was there anything that he left behind that said, "Son, this is for you," or did he say that?
Well,
I'm sure that's a question that.
oh,
right?
absolutely. And here's the thing. So the reason why this never planned out was because my father owed child support arrears. He owed in 2002 when these properties were deeded to him, or my grandmother deeded the properties to her kids. My father specifically didn't accept it because he owed over 50 grand in child support arrears. So for all these years, he never accepted the property. So right before I got evicted, we went to child support services. My mother, who stayed with me, who was evicted with me, we went to child support services and we were like, hey, I'm about to get evicted. He owes child support. Apparently he transferred this property to my brother right before his death. How is that possible? Well, they didn't do anything. They just said it's out of our scope. You have to hire an attorney. So we were like, wow, okay. So I go through the trial, and that's what became of it. But I actually got the court transcripts of a child support hearing that he and my stepmother attended a month before he passed away, and a month before this fraudulent deed was created. In the court transcripts, he specifically says that he does not own the property. He denies his interest. And he identifies as my auntie the one that owns it. And at the time, my auntie did own it. My stepmother created a fraudulent conveyance right before he died, made him sign it, filed it through her sister, and started telling the story that my father was the original rightful owner of this property when really he was not. And she played this narrative, and she made the OAG, the Office of Attorney General, file a petition in court to have it investigated. And what ended up happening was the OAG investigated it. They took my auntie to court based off the fraudulent documents that my stepmother created. And then they transferred the property back to my father's estate, who we never owned the property ever. And now it legitimized the fraudulent deed.
Wow.
Then she orchestrated the eviction and everything after that. So there's 3 court cases that transpired off of these fraudulent documents. Nobody wants to go up against this. I went to 39 attorneys. After I said the whole entire story and provided the evidence, they're like, conflict of interest with the attorney that I'm alleging assisted with them.
Okay.
I went to nonprofit agencies. First time I was approved of it, And then only until after I provided all the evidence, they come back and they're like, sorry, we can't help you. Lack of funds, lack of attorneys. So access to the justice system is non-existent here when it's against other attorneys. And that's what I'm here today for, is to bring awareness to that. We see it in the media right now, the OAG and the governor and all of these people just clashing right now. And I think that a lot of it has to do with my case as well. And it got to a point to where nobody's being held accountable for these. They're just throwing out, pointing fingers. My case clearly shows systemic failures and injustices documented. These are not allegations anymore. J. Ariola's law firm proved and confirmed that these documents housed are fraudulent, or not fraudulent, but are not the documents that he created.
They're not the originals.
Not the originals. So how did these documents come into play?
Yeah.
For the past 3 years, I've been yelling fraud, forgery, identity theft, and I've been ignored, only to find out 3 years later that it's not just one document, there's 12 documents, and it's all filed under Department of Land Management.
That are fraudulent.
Correct.
Believed to be fraudulent.
Correct. And nobody wants to touch this. I've been emailing on a regular basis. I provided you the paperwork.
Yeah.
It's not a nice email. I am angry, I am furious, I'm enraged, because it could have stopped 3 years ago when I first encountered it, but for whatever reason, they just didn't want to do it. And now it's added up, and now the whole entire story is about to be broken, out here in public now.
Right.
I'm gonna push for it. I just can't walk away from this.
Thank you for sharing that, Eddie, your response and how it's impacting you emotionally and just, I'm sure financially, because you have to spend your time there. But walk me back to when the trial was happening and what happened when you were left there just to kind of represent yourself in the courtroom to try and get action and move this forward. What happened?
So I went into the courtroom, right, and the judge immediately was like, would you like time to get representation? And I was like, I'm sorry, it's not necessary, I can't afford it. So he allowed me to proceed as pro se, representing myself. I was armed with the information that Gary Gumatata gave me. So in that courtroom, as I'm trying to fight for, my right to be in this home, and I say that the property is not under not under my brother, but it's under the estates of my father, that throws them off completely. Not even the attorney was aware of that. It should have been dismissed, but the judge, because I'm a pro se defendant, I'm not represented by an attorney, literally doesn't take anything that I'm saying into consideration. I try to defend it. The attorney starts to say that he has a deed of gift from his client. He acknowledges the property not being under his client.
A deed of gift from the client being
my brother.
Yep.
Yeah. So he acknowledges, after I say that the property is under the estates, the judge asks the attorney, is that true? And he finally looks at the paperwork in court and he's like, yes, but my client has a deed of gift. And the judge is like, he has a deed of gift from the person of the estates? He goes, yes. I object to that. And I'm like, I object. A deed of gift doesn't, so an unlawful detainer action is for possession, physical possession. A deed of gift only conveys interest to a property. It doesn't grant legal possession. So I told the judge, I said, I object to this evidence because a deed of gift only conveys interest to a property. It doesn't grant physical possession. And this civil lawsuit is for physical possession. He got extremely pissed off. He was like, excuse me, I gave you the right, I gave you a chance to get a continuance to seek legal representation. And I was like, okay. And he goes, so because you waived your rights, that's where we're at.
But I thought you told me you would represent self-representation.
I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be. But he tells me literally that because I waived my right to counsel, only licensed attorneys can make statements, proper defenses, and objections in court.
Have you inquired with another attorney about this? About
Yeah,
what the
yeah.
judge-
You know, the crazy part about this is that I actually recorded it.
Yeah.
Okay, this court hearing should have been recorded. There should have been transcripts, but because it went so far south in it, I mean, the bombshell of it not being under the attorney's client was enough to shut it down. But because it went further into that, there's no record of the minute entry report on file. Thankfully, I have my audio recording. So when I went to different attorneys and I was like, check this out, I recorded it. Here's the thing. They listened to it the first 5 minutes. They're like, turn it off. I don't want it. They don't, I guess it's because of the way I got the recording and you're not supposed to record. I don't know. I don't know what the legal standpoint is, but it should have been recorded there, but it wasn't. So
Maybe not being admissible as evidence, but
right,
I
right.
mean,
They just
it's
didn't
still
want it. It's
proof
disturbing
to work off.
It's
of, yeah.
disturbing to hear because you hear me clearly say, I object to the deed of gift as admissible evidence, and I kindly request you to dismiss this case. He goes, no, excuse me. He's like, no, stop. I'm going to continue this. And I'm like, for what? And he's like, for you to get legal representation. And I was just like, that's crazy. You know,
Yeah.
the only documentation that I do have is the minute entry report. It does say that the client or the defendant will proceed today pro se. And then on the bottom of that minute entry report, it says continuing for 2 weeks for the defendant to seek legal representation. But the truth is he didn't continue that for 2 weeks for me to seek legal representation. He continued that hearing for the attorney to withdraw, not to proceed and submit fraudulent documents. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit, so that continuance stopped for a whole year and a half. But the moment the pandemic was lifted and everything was put back into place, the attorney filed for continuance. I never got the documents that he submitted in that was fraudulent. And by the time I showed up to court, they were like, you're out, get out of here. You're not supposed to be in here. I had to tell the judge, and I had to tell, because the attorney actually, during the pandemic, requested a reassignment of a judge.
Okay.
So it originally started with Sison and it ended with Quan. So when I had Quan, I told him the whole entire situation. I even provided him the child support case. The certificate of title that the attorney submitted, it was crazy. It's fraudulent on its face value because it says that my brother is the owner as of November 8th, 2019. Well, the court cases that took place in regards to ownership was on appeal, pending the decision between my auntie and my father's estate.
Okay.
Has nothing to do with my brother on it.
Okay.
The fact that he produced a certificate of title during that, my entire case, the unlawful detainer action, was during a pending appeal that has yet to be determined of original ownership, and it has nothing to do with my brother. So from the onset of this whole entire situation, there was procedural errors and problems that existed from the very beginning that the judges, the attorneys were all just negligent, and it's insane.
Sounds like a messy situation.
It's disturbing, and
Yeah.
I'm not an attorney. I had to learn this as I went along, and it played out in real time. It bothers me 3 years later that here I am fighting for like fraud, forgery, and trying to get justice for this, when really the bigger problem is not the initial fraud. It's the procedures and all these cases that happened because of that fraud, and all of these negligent people that didn't take notice of it and should have responded, and it never should have happened.
Yeah.
So now the reason why I'm still fighting for it is because the Office of Attorney General is the one that assisted my stepmother in the transfer. So they don't want any part of it. They're like, what? Okay, we overlook these things, but they're not acknowledging it. I went to the regulatory committee to file against the attorney. I sent you the letter of dismissal. In that document, I alleged all these different things that actually happened. Like I said, they're not allegations anymore. These are concrete proof. They neglected to mention the direct evidence that I have, which is a child support hearing where my father denies his interest to the property with my stepmother attending there. If they acknowledge just that portion of it, everything, all three cases are washed. Because of
It'll start to make sense, I'm sure, to them.
because her narrative was, he's the rightful owner. He transferred this property before he died to my son. We should have it. His sister has it when she shouldn't. It's his. But it was all based off of fraudulent documents. And the key player in this whole thing is her sister that worked for Department of Land Management. That is the tip of the spear. And she just retired November of last year. So when these proceedings were happening since 2017,
Yeah.
she was in complete control of all the documents that the Office of Attorney General used in court, including managing it there at the offices. The regulatory committee, when they dismissed my complaint, they identified certain things. They also responded to the Department of Land Management when I alleged that the notary on the document of the fraudulent conveyance hasn't expired still, and it's colored in. I'm not sure if you saw the document, but you can't see the expiration date, nothing. That's invalid. There's not that many requirements that an employee has to do when they're registering the documents, but part of the requirements is it has to be legible. You have to see it. You don't have to confirm if the notary is actually valid or not, but you have to be able to read it. That's a clear sign. You can't read it. And the fact that she registered a property and the grantor on that document is not even the owner on file. It was my auntie, and this document came from my father. It's just a big mess, and it never should have happened. And because of it, I got kicked out of my house.
In 2019?
In 2021.
Okay.
I was evicted. I was court ordered and I was evicted. I couldn't find any alternative to move to, because I honestly didn't think I was going to lose. How could I lose when I have all this evidence?
Yeah.
So when I did get kicked out, by the time I had to move out, by the time I accepted it, I was pretty pissed off, and I couldn't move out on the day that I was required to. So the following day, court marshals came and kicked all of us out. I'd had all my property in this home. It was a few days later when I discovered the fraud, and I was like, oh my God, the notary, this is how she did it. I filed the report. I emailed the attorney that represented my stepmother, and I said, bro, I just found out that this whole thing is a sham. She tricked you. This is a fraudulent conveyance. All of this is all a fraud. Don't touch my stuff. I filed a police report. They're going to contact you. He actually responds back to me, and he says, thanks, Eddie. I'm sorry I'm on vacation right now. I'll take a look at the documents when I get back. But in the meantime, contact your stepmother. All of your things are being placed in storage. You can arrange to pick them up through her. And I was like, after I just told him that okay, and you know what happened? I contacted her. She found out about the police report that I filed. She took all of my property and threw it out in the yard. She offered neighbors and everybody to come in and ask for it. My uncle calls me up and he says, Ed, did you get your things out of your house? And I go, no. And he goes, well, it's all on the yard. And it was a whole other level. Thankfully, my grandmother and my mother was able to hold me back. But
Who's living there now?
it's being rented out.
Okay.
I filed the police report the moment I got evicted, and it's been 3 years. I filed it December 2021. It's still pending 2025, even with all the new information that I have. From the moment that I filed that police report and they didn't investigate her and they just kind of just brushed it off, she rented it out to people. My brother and her hasn't stayed there. She's been earning about $3,000 a month from the tenants for the past 3 years.
Okay.
And she hasn't been back on Guam since.
Clearly, Eddie, your fight is not over.
No.
We want to thank you, of course, for coming on here and
thank you.
sharing your story on the Hub. I want you to also, if you want to, look into the camera right there and just kind of share your message with our viewers and the legal community. What would you like from them?
Sure, yeah, thank you. First off, thank you for allowing me to come here and to tell my story. My main goal from this is to convey to everybody on Guam that actually owns a property listed under Department of Land Management. I recommend you go there and you look under your property and you request documents, everything filed under that property, and to verify it, to double check to see if anything is out of the ordinary. I strongly suggest you guys do that because I have concrete proof that the properties that my grandmother transferred to her kids back in 2002, they were all altered and they're all fraudulent. So I'm assuming that this is not the only isolated case. So I want everybody to keep in mind that this is a very big deal. And I suggest anybody that owns property to go down to the Department of Land Management and to verify that. And secondly, to the offices of the Attorney General, GPD, to the Guam Judiciary, I want you to know that my efforts over the past 3 years hasn't been isolated to just you guys. That I've been contacting everybody, to the DOJ, to the FBI. It's only a matter of time before outside intervention comes in and really investigates these crimes committed and the inaction by all of you. I hope that by coming here, you will see what my true determination is. I refuse to be ignored. This is my home. These are my things. This is my life. And I'm a father of two, a single father. And this is what it's about. I'm trying to provide for my family, and I refuse to be treated this way. We need accountability on the island. And the fact that you guys keep talking and going back and forth with each other doesn't help anybody. But this is a real problem that you can deal with now. And I hope that by seeing this and me coming forward proves to you how far I'm willing to take it to make sure I get justice for it. Thank you, everybody.
Good job there, Eddie, and thank you so much for speaking to our viewers and for
much.
coming in. We wish you all the best. We'll continue to follow the story to see what develops with the findings and the evidence that you've since uncovered.
Yes.
Again, good luck.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you also for watching this episode of The Hub, where America's stories begin. I'm Nick Delgado. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon.